In the early 2000s, a young woman walked into the elite halls of Silicon Valley carrying a vision that seemed nothing short of miraculous. Her name was Elizabeth Holmes, and she claimed she could change the world with nothing more than a single drop of blood. She spoke with unshakable confidence, dressed in a black turtleneck reminiscent of Steve Jobs, and promised to revolutionize medicine forever. But behind the bold promises, billion-dollar investments, and glamorous magazine covers lay a truth darker and more fragile than anyone imagined. This is the story of Theranos, one of the greatest frauds in modern history, the beginning of a vision. Elizabeth Holmes was born in 1984 in Washington, D.C., to an ambitious family that believed in big dreams and bold achievements. From a young age, she was determined to be extraordinary. She pushed herself academically, obsessed over success, and, at just 18 years old, she attended Stanford University to study chemical engineering. During her freshman year, she told her professors she wanted to create a device that could diagnose diseases instantly from just a few drops of blood taken from the fingertip. Most professors dismissed her idea as impossible, but Holmes was not discouraged. She believed that if she repeated the vision often enough, eventually people would believe it. At just 19, she dropped out of Stanford and started her own company, Theranos. Theranos is born. Theranos was created with an inspiring mission: to eliminate the pain, cost, and inconvenience of traditional blood testing. Holmes promised to develop a machine that could run hundreds of medical tests using only a pinprick of blood. No needles, no vials, no waiting days for results. It sounded futuristic, even magical. Investors were captivated. The media loved her. She spoke with passion, used phrases like democratizing healthcare and revolutionizing diagnostics, and carried an energy that felt unstoppable. In Silicon Valley, where innovation is worshipped, Holmes became a rising star. Soon, she hired a team of scientists and engineers and secured millions in funding. The Edison machine, a dream or a lie? Holmes revealed her invention, a small, sleek blood testing device called Edison. According to her, Edison could perform over 200 medical tests with just a drop of blood. It could detect cancer, high cholesterol, diabetes, infections, everything, faster and cheaper than any lab in the world. The problem? Edison didn't work. Inside the company, scientists panicked. The machine produced wildly inconsistent results, often failing completely. It was incapable of performing the majority of tests Holmes claimed it could, but Elizabeth refused to accept failure. Instead, she hid it. Employees say she silenced criticism, fired anyone who questioned her, and created a culture of fear. Workers were divided into isolated teams, told not to speak to each other, and pressured to meet impossible deadlines. Theranos was becoming a company built on secrecy and lies. The money starts pouring in. Despite Edison's flaws, Holmes kept raising money. Crazy amounts of money. Former Secretary of State George Shultz invested. Media mogul Rupert Murdoch invested $125 million. Walgreens agreed to put Theranos devices in their pharmacies nationwide. The company valuation skyrocketed to $9 billion. Holmes herself became the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. Magazine covers called her the next Steve Jobs. Politicians praised her. Celebrities admired her. But behind the scenes, the truth remained hidden. The partnership with Walgreens. Walgreens was Theranos' biggest victory. Holmes promised that customers could walk into a pharmacy, prick their finger, and get full blood results within hours. But in reality, inside the Walgreens clinics, the Edison device was often broken, inaccurate, or simply not used. Instead, employees secretly drew regular vials of blood and sent them to traditional machines in a hidden back room. Still, the public believed the miracle was real. Holmes had built a perfect illusion. The whistleblowers. Theranos employees were becoming increasingly uncomfortable. They saw the truth every day. Machines failing, patients receiving false health results, and a company lying to regulators. Two young employees decided they couldn't stay silent anymore. Erica Chung, a lab worker who saw constant testing failures. Tyler Schultz, grandson of board member George Schultz. They contacted journalist John Carreyrou from the Wall Street Journal and exposed the internal chaos. It was a dangerous move. Holmes hired private investigators, threatened lawsuits, and tried to silence them. But the truth had already begun to surface. The article that changed everything. In October 2015, John Carreyrou published a groundbreaking story revealing Edison didn't work. Theranos used traditional blood analyzers. Results were often inaccurate and dangerous. The company had misled investors, doctors, and patients. Theranos collapsed almost overnight. Holmes tried to defend herself, calling the article false and insisting the technology worked. But investigation after investigation proved the opposite. By 2018, the company was dissolved. Holmes went from billionaire to bankrupt, from celebrated genius to disgraced fraud. The trial. In 2021, Elizabeth Holmes stood in a federal courtroom facing multiple charges of fraud. Prosecutors argued she intentionally misled investors and endangered patients by promoting technology she knew did not work. Her defense said she was a young entrepreneur who simply failed, not a criminal. But after hearing 11 weeks of evidence, the jury found her guilty on 4 counts of fraud and conspiracy. In 2022, she was sentenced to over 11 years in prison. A dream that once inspired millions was now remembered as one of the largest scams in Silicon Valley. The legacy of Theranos. Theranos didn't just deceive investors. It shattered trust in the medical innovation world. It taught us that charisma is not science. Vision is not proof. Confidence is not honesty. And no amount of ambition can replace real technology. Elizabeth Holmes aspired to change the world. And she did, just not in the way she intended. Instead of creating a medical revolution, she became the symbol of unchecked ambition, blind faith in innovation, and the dangers of believing a dream without demanding evidence. Closing words. This is the rise and fall of Elizabeth Holmes, a story of ambition, deception, power, and the cost of chasing greatness without truth. A story of a company that claimed to save lives, but ended up destroying trust. And a reminder that in the world of innovation, the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. As Theranos began to crumble under the weight of its own secrets, something remarkable and terrifying happened. The closer journalists and regulators got to the truth, the harder Elizabeth Holmes fought to protect the illusion she had built. Instead of admitting failure, she doubled down, creating a corporate battlefield where science, ethics, and human lives were caught in the crossfire. A company under siege. Inside Theranos headquarters in Palo Alto, pressure reached extreme levels. Employees described the office as a place where fear lived in every corner. Security guards monitored movements. Cameras watched every hallway, and digital access cards were required for almost every room. Holmes and her partner, Sunny Balwani, enforced absolute loyalty. They believed secrecy was necessary for innovation, but in reality, it became a tool of control. When journalists began asking questions, Holmes held emergency meetings. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes hardened. "We are being attacked," she said. "They want to stop our mission." In Silicon Valley, she framed the scrutiny as jealousy, a conspiracy against a woman changing the world. Many believed her. Many wanted to, but the walls were closing in. Patients started to speak out. As Theranos machines expanded into Walgreens stores, real patients began receiving terrifying results. A woman was told she might be having a stroke. Another was informed her thyroid levels were dangerously abnormal. A man was told he might have prostate cancer. All of these results were wrong. Doctors began noticing patterns. Patients who used Theranos often returned with second tests from real labs that contradicted the first results. Confusion turned to concern. Concern turned to complaints. This was no longer about investors losing money. It was about people's health, their fears, their lives. The internal war. Not everyone inside Theranos wanted to stay silent. Scientists tried to fix the machine. Engineers begged Holmes to slow down and address problems. But every objection was met with anger or removal. Some were fired. Some resigned. Some received lawsuits threatening to destroy their careers. One former scientist described opening the Edison machine and discovering leaking tubes, malfunctioning sensors, and a chaotic, unstable design. There was nothing magical inside, he said, just a box full of broken dreams. Holmes refused to listen. To her, doubt was treason. The government steps in. When Theranos began attracting regulatory attention, the company faced its most serious threat. Federal inspectors from CMS, the agency responsible for lab safety in the United States. Holmes prepared her employees for their arrival. She coached them on what to say and what not to say. Employees were told to clean up labs, hide problematic data, and present curated information. But during the inspection, one accident changed everything. A lab technician nervously walked into the bathroom with a crucial quality control report, a document that showed severe testing failures. The inspector followed her and demanded the paper. The truth was out. CMS later released a damning 121-page report stating Theranos technology posed immediate jeopardy to patients' health. Holmes could no longer keep the truth inside the building. The downfall in slow motion. Once the Wall Street Journal article came out, a chain reaction began. Walgreens severed its contract. Safeway abandoned a $350 million partnership. Investors filed lawsuits. Federal agencies launched investigations. Media turned Holmes from a hero into a warning. The company lost everything: trust, money, employees, partners. But Elizabeth Holmes remained defiant. She went on TV interviews. She repeated the same scripted lines. "We're doing something that has never been done before. We will fix the issues. The technology works." But no one believed her anymore. Her voice, once confident, hypnotic, now sounded hollow. Sunny Balwani, the enforcer. Theranos' downfall was not Holmes's alone. Her second-in-command, Sunny Balwani, played a huge role behind the scenes. 20 years older than Holmes, Balwani brought aggressive, military-style discipline to the company. He demanded impossible deadlines, insulted employees, and treated criticism as betrayal. Staff members described him as the shadow CEO, someone who operated through intimidation rather than leadership. Holmes later claimed that Balwani emotionally and psychologically controlled her. Balwani denied it. But their intertwined relationship added a deeper layer to the tragedy of Theranos, a mix of power, manipulation, fear, and ambition gone wrong. The final breath of Theranos. By 2018, Theranos was a dying company. The walls that once hid its secrets had collapsed. Regulators banned Holmes and Balwani from operating labs. Employees fled. Investors demanded answers. The money dried up. Holmes walked through the now empty offices where hundreds once worked toward a dream. The posters still hung on the walls, small motivational slogans like "one tiny drop changes everything." But now the rooms were silent. Theranos officially dissolved in September 2018. A company once valued at $9 billion now ended with zero. The trial of the century. The criminal trial of Elizabeth Holmes became one of the most watched in American history. For weeks, the courtroom was filled with victims, investors, journalists, and curious spectators. Holmes walked into the courtroom daily holding the hand of her partner, appearing calm, strangely serene. She spoke softly when she testified, admitting failures but denying intent to deceive. The prosecution argued that Holmes lied intentionally, not once, not twice, but for years. They showed emails, reports, messages, all proving she knew the company's technology didn't work. The jury listened carefully. In January 2022, they reached a verdict. Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 4 counts of fraud. Her sentence: 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. The woman who once promised to change the world was now, quite literally, behind bars. What remains of the myth? Even after everything, some people still wonder, was Elizabeth Holmes a visionary who went too far, or a manipulator who never had real technology? The truth may lie somewhere in between. She dreamed big, extraordinarily big. She had the charisma, the intelligence, the courage to pursue an impossible challenge. But instead of facing failure honestly, she hid it. Instead of seeking help, she silenced critics. Instead of telling the truth, she created a fantasy. Theranos became a castle built on sand, beautiful from far away, but impossible to stand. And when the tide came in, everything washed away. The lessons of Theranos. Theranos leaves behind powerful lessons. Innovation requires transparency, not secrecy. Hype is not proof. Science cannot be rushed by confidence or charisma. And sometimes, the most dangerous people are not the villains who intend harm, but the dreamers who cannot accept reality. Elizabeth Holmes changed the world, just not the way she hoped. Her story is now taught in universities, studied by business leaders, and remembered as a warning for generations to come. A warning that ambition without honesty can burn down even the brightest future. Continuation. After the Empire, the echo of Theranos. When Theranos finally collapsed, the world didn't simply close the chapter. Because Theranos was never just a company. It was a symbol of a generation's blind faith in innovation, a monument to ambition without restraint, and a warning about the power of belief. And after the fall, the real story began. A world asking questions. As the dust settled, journalists, scientists, and investors asked the same uncomfortable question. How did one woman convince the smartest people in the world to believe a lie? To answer it, you must understand something deeper than business fraud. You must understand the psychology of hope. People didn't just believe in Elizabeth Holmes. They needed to believe in her. A young woman challenging the medical world. A visionary claiming she could save millions of lives. A Silicon Valley hero in a black turtleneck. It was the perfect story, too perfect for anyone to question. The forgotten victims. While headlines focused on investors losing millions, the real victims lived in silence. A mother's fear. One pregnant woman received a Theranos test suggesting a life-threatening complication for her baby. She spent days unable to sleep, shaking with fear, preparing for the worst. Later, a real lab confirmed everything was normal. The emotional trauma? Permanent. Another case. A man was told his PSA levels indicated possible prostate cancer. He prepared to tell his family. He braced himself for chemotherapy. A retest proved the result was false. Theranos didn't just take money. It took peace of mind. It took trust in medicine itself. Elizabeth Holmes after Theranos. After the company dissolved, Holmes tried to reinvent herself. Gone was the deep voice. Gone was the cold, unwavering stare. Gone was the black turtleneck. She began appearing soft-spoken, emotional, vulnerable, an image far from the powerful CEO she once portrayed. But former employees weren't convinced. One said, "She's not sorry. She just changed costumes." Inside the courtroom, a national drama. The criminal trial became one of the largest media spectacles since Enron. The courtroom filled with the faces of her past. Former employees who had been threatened. Doctors whose patients were harmed. Investors who had been charmed, then deceived. Patients who still lived with the fear of what might have been. Holmes entered each day calmly, often smiling slightly, holding her partner's hand. Her lawyers presented her as a brilliant but overwhelmed young woman. Someone manipulated by Sunny Balwani. Someone who meant well but lost control. They said she was naive, inexperienced, and pressured. The prosecution painted a different picture. Calculated. Strategic. A liar who knew exactly what she was doing. They showed emails, texts, lab reports, all proving Holmes intentionally deceived investors, partners, and patients. Every word, every slide, every statement was a carefully crafted illusion. The moment of truth. When Holmes took the stand, the courtroom was silent. She admitted mistakes, admitted failures, but denied the one thing prosecutors insisted on: intentional fraud. Her voice trembled at times, but her eyes, those same eyes that once convinced millions, remained steady. Was she acting? Was she sincere? The jury had to decide, and after days of deliberation, they did. In January 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 4 federal counts. The verdict sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley. For the first time, a tech icon was held criminally accountable not for financial missteps, but for the consequences of selling a dream that never existed. Prison, the great equalizer. In 2023, Elizabeth Holmes reported to a federal women's prison in Texas. No fame, no cameras, no private jet, no boardroom, just a 10 by 10 room, simple clothes, strict routines, and a new identity. Inmate Holmes, the woman once worth $4.5 billion, now earned less than $1 an hour doing prison jobs. People often wondered what she thought about in that small room. Did she regret her lies? Or did she still believe she was a misunderstood visionary? No one knew for sure. The legacy of fear and fascination. Theranos left scars on the medical world, but it also left questions that still haunt Silicon Valley. How far should we trust charismatic founders? Can ambition justify bending the truth? Is disruption worth risking human lives? Theranos also forced investors, journalists, and regulators to rethink the very foundation of modern innovation. The era of fake it till you make it had met its breaking point. But the story doesn't end with Holmes. Because Theranos wasn't just Elizabeth Holmes. It was the investors who didn't ask questions, the journalists who wanted a hero, the employees who stayed silent out of fear, the partners who ignored the warning signs, the culture that celebrated vision over truth. The Theranos scandal exposed weaknesses in society itself. Our obsession with innovation, our hunger for miracles, our willingness to believe the unbelievable. Holmes may be in prison, Theranos may be gone, but the mindset that created them still lives on. A warning for the future. In business classes, medical schools, and startup communities, Theranos is now a case study taught around the world. A story of how ambition turns to delusion, delusion turns to deception, and deception destroys everything. The lesson is simple. Medicine cannot be built on hope alone. Science does not bend to charisma. And saving lives requires honesty, not hype. Elizabeth Holmes wanted to change the world. In the end, she did, just not the way she imagined.